TalkKafe. Hi guys, welcome back. This is Aaron. Aaron is doing big things. So Aaron is in his first year, going to his second year in university here in Canada, and he's in pre-law. He's going to become a lawyer. So Aaron also has encountered racism here in Canada.
Yeah.
Two brothers who's encountered racism, and we think there's no racism here in Canada, or it's just covert, but no, it's not. Aaron, do you mind sharing your encounter with us?
Yeah, for sure. Well, one thing that I just want to point out is a lot of people think that racism and discrimination happens when you're older. You experience it when you are fully at a developed mind state when you're older, but I can look at racism even starting long before that. Being in elementary school, me and my brother, we moved from Rexdale, Toronto, and we moved up to Markham and Stouffville. And I remember we went to our elementary school. Me and him were 2 out of 8 black kids at our whole school. 2 out of 8. And I remember a lot of times not being picked to play soccer or football. I remember a lot of times where they would call me a monkey, and I just thought at that time, this is just how they are. It's all right. It's cool. Growing up and realizing, I'm just like, yeah, that wasn't. I was being discriminated against without knowing, because I felt like that was the norm. Getting older still happened. High school, I was called darkness, which is, it's funny, but it's messed up. A lot of the times, a lot of kids would call me Caesar at school. If you don't know, it's a reference to Rise of the Planet of the Apes. And I was called that from grade 10 all the way up to grade 12. And I was for me to understand a joke as if it's funny to me. For a white kid to come up to me and say, "Yo, you look like a famous movie star, Caesar, from Rise of the Planet of the Apes." And I was like, thanks, I look like an ape. And being called that for 3 out of the 4 years of high school, it gets to you eventually. First year of university, I moved away from home, went to Peterborough, Trent University, and I thought it would be different, but I feel like that's where I felt the most blatant acts of racism that I've ever felt. I remember there was one time I was helping a friend home from a party, and I dropped her off at her home, and I was walking my way back to my place. And as I was walking back, a group of guys in a car, they pulled up beside me and started yelling the N-word. And then they proceeded to throw eggs at me. And that was the first time I was like, yo, this actually just happened. And I thought it would be like a one-time occurrence, but I was egged 3 times while at school. The first time, it was with a group of people. Second time was on my own. The third time I was on my own. And the third time it happened, I was close to where my friends were, so I went to go tell my friends, and my friends had tried to look for the people who had done it, and we had spotted them, but they were in their car, and by the time one of my friends wanted to go confront them, they'd zoomed off. I remember that the day I got egged, I put it onto the Trent student app. I was on the app, and I was just like, this is so messed up. I was just egged. Does anybody know what's going on? And me saying that, expecting that I would get some type of sympathy or people who were actually willing to go out and help. I got a lot of laughing emojis and a lot of people who were just like, "Yo, don't worry, it was a joke, it was a prank." And that hit me hard, because I was just like, I know how I'm feeling, and I would wish that other people would understand that, but they didn't. The egging was one part. I remember the most blatant experience at Trent, which is the point that made me say, you know what, I'm done. I don't want to ever go back to that place. Was when I was at a party with some of my friends, and there was this one girl. We both had mutual differences. We accepted that we didn't really like each other. I explained to her, listen, you're very disrespectful and rude, and I don't appreciate the way you speak and treat people, so please don't. She took offense to that, and instead of blowing it up, I said, you know what, let's just agree to disagree. We'll not see each other, we won't speak to each other, we'll just leave it at that. So I remember I went to a party with some of my friends, and I got into the party first. My friends were still waiting to get in, and I'm in the party, chilling, dancing and everything, and the same girl grabs me by the back of my shirt, and she's pulling me. And I was just like, who's pulling me? So I turn around and I see it's her, and I was just like, is there an issue? Is there a problem? And she's like, your friends are calling you. And I was just like, I said to her, I was like, could you not have said that? Could you not have just tapped me on my shoulder and told me that? She said, I don't really like you, but I'm just doing this. So she continued to pull me out of the party by my shirt. She pulled me out of the party by my shirt. And it got to a point where I literally started to scream. I was like, can everybody see what's happening right now? And everybody in the party stopped, and they all watched as I was getting dragged out. And one guy came up and he was like, get off of him. And he like karate chopped her hand off of me so that she would let me go. So we go outside, and as we're outside, she's still following me. I'm just like, I can see my friends now. It's not an issue. You can go back inside. You called me to bring me to my friends. Now that I see them, you can go back. She said, no. Today I want to deal with our issue. So she went off. F you. And I was like, okay, thank you. I appreciate your aggressiveness. She just went off, going off. And I, being me, I laughed. Like, I found it entertaining to see someone lose their head just for the fact that I was there. So she's coming at me with so much energy, and I was saying stuff back. It was an altercation. And she said, call me this word again. And I looked at her and I said, leave me alone, you blank. She stopped, smiled, and looked at me and said, segregation existed for a reason. You should know your place in the grand scheme of things. And when that was said to me, I was just like, I can't even forget the words, because I remember the night it happened, I went to my phone and I typed out my feelings, because I was so angry that I wanted to go at her. My friend MJ, realest dude at that school, I'll never forget, he was my boy. He said to me, he's like, bro, you're the victim. If you go at her now, you'll go from the victim to the aggressor.
Exactly.
And the amount of people who are watching just know whose side they will take. So I looked at that and I couldn't say anything. I just started crying.
Wow.
I was the kid crying outside of a party. And I'm happy that the party wasn't too far away from my house so I could walk home. But at this point, like, I didn't know how to feel. Like, this is the one time where somebody could say something to me and I couldn't say something back. I always like, I don't like to say I like to be dominant, but I want to be on an equal playing field with somebody. But when somebody says that I'm not even on an equal playing field because of the way I am, because of my skin color, I didn't know how to feel, because yeah, I know we've moved past that, but have we really moved past it?
That's a question.
That's the question. Segregation did exist, but does it not still exist? It's a lot of subtle things, and when she said that, I took a step back and I was just like, yeah, these are just mean words, but could what she's saying be true? Could I actually be less than her? And that's what I feel hurt me a lot more than anything else. After going through that, what's crazy is the fact that that girl was in the same group of friends as I was in. So me expecting my friends to have my back, they all turned and were just like, she just said it. Get over it. And when I heard that, I was just like, it got to a point where I didn't want to leave my house. I didn't want to go to classes because the people who I thought would have my back didn't. My friends that I thought would be there for me told me that my feelings, I should take how I feel and just throw it away because somebody said something in the spur of the moment. And it just like, I told my mom, I was just like, it's one of those things where just like, once you hear it, and once you feel it, and once you see how people react to it, there's not much you can do. Because I would have loved to go back to chill with my friends. But after that whole situation, I was just like, if you can't see the issue, and you can't see the problem with what was said, then I don't think we could ever chill. And it made it hard for me because I had classes with all these people. When I wanted to go out, these people were always there. So I found myself throughout the later end of the school year just staying at home, not going out, not going to class, because if I did go to class, people who I thought would have been there for me weren't. So it was a lot, to be completely honest. And that's one of the reasons why I was just like, I don't think I could ever see myself going back to that school because of the history and how that place personally made me feel. I'm not saying this to bash the school or anything. I'm just saying my experience there made it so that I could never look at that place as a place to ever bring me happiness or success later on in my life.
Wow.
How can I be successful in a place where I feel scared?
Wow.
And like, the thing with it is, I wish it could be different. I wish I could be more happy with the situation and how things were, but I just can't, knowing that that's how racism and discrimination is handled nowadays. And even though I know it was something said a long time ago, it always still rings in the back of my head when she said segregation existed for a reason. Know your place in the grand scheme of things. And when someone says that to you, like, I honestly didn't want to believe it, but I still did. She got into my head and made me feel like I was less than I actually was. And I looked around, and the people who would have watched what happened and were there when they heard what had happened, they all looked at me and turned around. So even when the people around saw something bad happen, they turned their back on it. And then it's just a lot. Like, I have friends in Toronto who want to go out to certain places, and there's signs on the door, don't dress like this or you're not allowed in.
Oh, okay, yes.
And the rules specifically target a certain demographic.
Do you think that it categorizes a certain group of people, or is it just a dress code?
Difference, though, between a dress code and discrimination. And I feel like if you look at certain things like no do-rags, that's a rule that categorizes only a certain group of people. And I feel like when it comes to black people, we've had a lot of situations where we aren't allowed to be in certain places because we don't fit the grand scheme of things. The story of the two men who went to Starbucks and got arrested because they didn't fit the Starbucks aesthetic. They looked out of place. To who, though?
I think it's also the area,
like,
because
with racism, it's something that needs to be addressed. I feel like it's something that isn't addressed. I feel like it's definitely something that's brushed under the rug. A lot of people want to say, we've gone past that. Martin Luther King helped. Racism is over. If you ask me, Martin Luther King didn't die for us to stop fighting for what we believe is right for us. We can't look at the work that so many people did to get us to a certain spot and say that we're comfortable where we are. Because it still goes on, and it continues to go on, and there's a history of it. And it'll just continue to move on. This conversation even brought me back to a moment when I was the same girl that had said those words to me. I remember I was chilling at her house, and she had friends. She's from Etobicoke. She had friends from Etobicoke come up, and she was talking about how Etobicoke was being changed from a place that's comfortable for whites and is now being filled with, in her words, ghetto people. So I was just like, when she said that, this is kind of the reason why our disagreement started. This is before this whole situation. I was just like, so you're saying that there are too many black people in Etobicoke? And she said, yes, there are. And that is how our differences started. So I feel like, and taking this person is my age. It's not like I'm talking to an old person. This is somebody my age who feels this way about black people.
Really do exist.
It does exist.
It does exist. It is out there because I've experienced it before. I'll share my experience later on, but today it's all about Josh and Aaron. And from what we're hearing, racism do exist here in Canada in this day and age. Did you cope with it afterwards?
To be completely honest, I don't think I've coped with it completely. It's hard to cope with something and try to feel like you're accepted when the people you want to accept you and the people you feel like should be there for you don't. So when I wanted to cope and when I wanted to reach out to make myself feel better, those people told me that I should brush it under the rug. So for me, coping was sitting at home, writing music, like, you know, I write music, designing clothes, doing all of that. Like, my coping was to keep my mind off of it, to not think about it, to drown myself in work so that I don't think about it anymore. And I don't know if it's a completely healthy coping mechanism to just block it out and not accept it and try to tackle the issue, but that's how I coped. When it comes to how we can change it, I don't think it's something that we can do on an individual level. We need certain people. I feel like we need the schools to accept that this is an actual issue. I feel like making February just Black History Month instead of teaching Black history out throughout the whole year, because 1 month isn't enough to tell you about hundreds of years of history. Putting certain things into place so that certain people feel accepted. I remember at my high school we had it was called, I forget what it was called. It was the Gay Straight Alliance. At our school we had it. But we've never had anything go out to speak against racism or discrimination. We never had places for people to sit down and talk about how they felt or how they've been discriminated against and how they want to feel better, or people to just talk to. And I feel like a lot of, especially in school, they say go to guidance. But when it comes to guidance, I don't want to share a lot of kids my age don't want to share their thoughts and their feelings with somebody who's older than them. They want to talk to people their age. They want to talk to people who they feel would understand them. If you throw me into a room with a 60-year-old man and tell him how I feel like it has to be on a global thing. We need to re-educate people. We need to let people know that nobody is better than anybody else.
That's true.
There is no such thing as hierarchy. We are all born equal. We all came to the planet the same way, and we all leave the same way. So what makes you better than me, and what makes
Going
me
back
better than you?
to your experience at Trent, did you, the incident to the school authorities?
What I did was I reported it to a Don. And the thing with the Don is in charge of the annex, which is where all the students lived. I didn't live in the annex, but the Don who I went to spoke to had issues with that girl before. And had spoken about it. And I went to him and I was just like, I'm coming to you to let you know that this is how I feel. And the good thing about the Dons are that they're our age. So I can speak to a Don and let them know how I feel. And I told the Don, this is everything that I feel. And he said, don't worry, Aaron, I'll get back to you and we'll try to get this fixed. Whole school year went. Nothing happened. I stayed looking at my inbox for emails, didn't receive any. I remember on the very last day of school, I went to him and I was like, thank you for showing me how you deal with these type of issues. And when he wanted to say something back, I just got up and left. I wanted him to know that I hadn't forgotten. I know he might have, but I didn't. And that was my one issue with the whole thing was, he told me, he said to me, he was just like, don't worry, we can get this done. It'll be good. And I realized that it wasn't, we never dealt with it. Nothing ever happened. So I tried. I could have tried harder. I could have gone to the actual school, but I felt like going to somebody in power should have felt like going to someone who has the power to take it to the school should have been enough.
Yeah, that experience. Are you thinking of going back to the same school, or you're...
I've already applied to multiple schools in Toronto because I don't want to go back there.
So, thank you, Aaron, for sharing your experience.
Yeah.
That was deep.
Very emotional, very, very emotional. And
can you imagine
in
that?
2018, not 1960.
2018, we're still experiencing racism. Of course we are. I mean, look at this young man. First year in school, and so many experiences of racism.
And not only first year in school, but he's experienced it.
We've all experienced it.
We've experienced it. But I mean, I didn't know this. She just shared it today.
Yeah.
He shared a little bit, but
high school, from elementary school.
From elementary school. A lot of people don't realize, but even at that young of an age, when you're getting told, nah, you can't play with us, you can't hang with us, or getting called a monkey all throughout elementary school, and laughing about it because you thought that this is just what they say. Now, getting older and looking back at it, I'm realizing that, nah, this wasn't just them playing jokes. Because if it was a joke, why wasn't it said to everybody else? Why was it just everybody targeting me?
We overanalyze things. Is it that we're overanalyzing things, or it is what it is?
I feel like if you feel like your friends should be there for you, nothing should be too dramatic. I feel like if I had an issue, I was talking to one of my friends over the course of the week, and she said that at her workplace, someone had accused another coworker of sexual harassment. And let me tell you something. If that was my friend and she came to me, would I tell her to brush it under the rug? Not to compare both, but to say that if I was told something by somebody who was in distress, would my first reaction be to brush it under the rug or try my best to help them? Personally, if my friend is in distress, I want to do whatever I can.
What do you think needs to be done in order for this to change? I know it does not take one person to change it. A whole village should, or as a people, we can. If can we change it? I think yes.
Like, I'm always a big believer in nobody's born racist.
Exactly.
You're taught it.
Yeah.
So the only way we can educate is to educate the people who teach it. The kids who are growing up, if they become racist, they're learning it from their parents.
It is. Yes.
They're learning it from the people they surround themselves with. So if we want to change that, we have to change it. We can't do it I don't believe it's something that can be done in this generation. But we can do it for the next generation. Go into schools now and teach them at a young age to accept. Just tell them that Jimmy and Tyrell are no different from each other. They're the same. Yes, he may be black. Yes, he may be white. But you guys are all kids and all the same. If you teach them that from a young age, by the time they get older, they'll teach that off to their kids. And it goes like that. Right now, and especially with the climate and the time that we're in, where discrimination and racism is literally on the forefront. Before, we used to feel like it's something under the rug. With, not trying to call the name, but Trump being the president of the United States, he's making it easier for people with that type of mindset to come out and feel like they're comfortable with their ideas and let them feel like this is all right. We can say this because he's our president. If he says we should get rid of Mexicans and send Africans back to Africa, if the president of the United States is saying that,
that's true.
So we're in a place where the people who should be guiding are pulling us back. That should be pushing us forward and pulling us back. So we need to get to a place where we can find people who feel the same way as us and can understand the issue and the problem with it and work to make it better.
So from what I'm hearing, I'm going back to what you said, that we can't change it in our generation, but it needs to be taught to the younger ones. Are you saying you cannot change someone who has been or who has had a racist mindset for the past, I don't know, while they were growing up? So you can't change someone from that mindset?
I feel like they can, but
Yeah,
I also feel like Martin Luther King and Malcolm X did the work that they did during their time for the next generation. They didn't just fight for their rights. They fought for the rights of the next generation. And everything that they did was so that the next generation could live in peace. So what we should do is continue that same fight in hopes that even if Martin Luther King didn't live to see the change that he brought, but in hopes that the change that we do bring helps the next generation, so that we know that our kids' kids can live in a world where they don't feel like they're being called a monkey or an N-word whenever they go outside.
Talking about it, just
Continue.
Protesting.
But we haven't yet. So
But
we
it
have
should
to
be a
continue
conversation,
to
because
protest.
even if we keep protesting, what are we protesting against?
The protest, see, the thing I want to say that both of you guys are right, because of the fact that the protesting changes to an extent. But protesting also brings protesters. So, let's see.
Can you break it down?
I'll break it
first?
down. So, we've seen a lot of Black Lives Matter protests.
Yes.
And what happens at every Black Lives Matter protest? Neo-Nazi protesters against.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, even when you try, or even when Black Lives Matter came out, the anti-protest to that was All Lives Matter. And I'm not saying that all lives don't matter. The argument with that was Black Lives Matter in a conversation where Black people are being killed by police at an alarming rate. If I was to ask you right now to sit down with a neo-Nazi, a person who says that they do not believe in equal rights with blacks and Jews, would you be able to sit down and have a conversation? Not an argument, a conversation. And a lot of us can't. A lot of us won't be able to have a conversation. So it's something that we need to change within ourselves. We need to be willing to listen and have a conversation. Because I've seen a lot of back and forth yelling. A lot of talking at people and not talking to people. So we can only get that change once both sides realize that they want to have a conversation. Protesting works.
It does work.
Martin Luther King did it. Malcolm X did it.
Yeah, so
they all
I
protested.
don't think they did.
But they always find something.
There's always something
exactly,
always something negative comes out of it.
Exactly, but that shouldn't stop people from protesting.
I'm not
That's
saying
what I'm saying. Though.
It should continue to go on, but as
continue,
long
we
as we
have to-
keep it peaceful.
Sure, and we got to find a solution now. In the future, we have to.
I truly believe to end racism is to get into the mind of a person, because it's a mind thing, and it's the environmental and it's a mind
Like
matter.
you rightfully said.
So educate. It's all about changing.
Change your mindset.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron.
That was deep.
Thank you.
Josh, Aaron,
Yes.
thank you. Intelligent brothers.
Today has been such an emotional day with such deep conversations from these two brothers. And we thank you, Aaron.
Keep the
And keep the conversation
going.
Keep
So,
it going.
And leave a comment down below. All right, subscribe. Thank you for joining us. Until next time. Bye-bye.
Talk.